I spent 7 years quietly paying off my parents' house, never asking for credit. On my sister's wedding day, they wrapped it up and handed it to her trophy husband like a prize. I stayed silent until they came for the last thing I owned. If you've ever felt invisible in your own family, this story is for you. And I promise by the end you'll understand why saying no was the loudest thing I ever did. My name is Elena Harper. I'm 38 years old, a financial consultant living in Asheville, North Carolina. I have a mortgage on a 2-bedroom apartment downtown, a dependable car with slightly scratched paint, and a partner who makes perfect scrambled eggs but forgets to replace the paper towels. Most days my life is quiet, stable, uneventful. But there's a house up on Willow Creek Road tucked between the whispering oaks and the rust-stained mailbox with a bent red flag that's where the silence in my life started to mean something else. I spent 7 years paying off that house. It wasn't in my name. It never was. But the payments came from my account month after month. Property tax insurance, roof repairs after the storm in 2018. Furnace replacement, pest control, the cracked tiles in the hallway. I covered them all. My father's hours at the auto shop had been cut to part-time after a back injury, and my mother's arthritis turned the stairs into a daily battle. Sierra, my younger sister, had just started a new job at a marketing agency in Charleston. I was the one still close, still steady, still useful. No one asked me to do it. No one thanked me for doing it either. It started with one payment, then another. And before I knew it, my budgeting spreadsheets had a line item called Home Theirs, Not Mine. I used to call it the family house. Back then, I believed in words like that. I believed that if I carried enough weight without complaining, someone would notice. That if I did the right thing long enough, I'd earn a place that wasn't negotiable. I believed I was building something shared. My mother once told me that family is like a quilt. Everyone contributes a square stitched together with love and time. But I learned quickly that some squares get embroidered in gold thread while others are used to patch holes. I was a patch always there to fix, but rarely admired. Sierra. She was the gold. She was born 3 years after me and grew up with a flair for attention and softness that pulled people in. She cried easily and loudly, and our parents mistook volume for vulnerability. I, on the other hand, was quiet, adaptable. The strong one, my mother would say with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. I knew what that meant. Strong girls don't need help. Strong girls don't get fussed over. When Sierra forgot her college rent payment, my parents drove 4 hours with a check. When I pulled double shifts in law school, they sent a text that said, "Proud of you. Hang in there." She got a car. I got a quote on resilience. Still, I never blamed her, not really. She played her part. I played mine. It wasn't her fault that my parents' love language was convenience, or that I learned to survive by needing less. I thought that was noble for a long time. Looking back now, I realize it was just lonely. The house on Willow Creek was my invisible monument to family. Every transfer I made, every bill I paid was an offering. I imagined one day, maybe during a family dinner, my parents would look across the table and say, "We couldn't have made it without you, Elena." They'd look at me, not through me, and I'd feel what Sierra always seemed to, belonging without having to earn it. I imagined birthday dinners, holidays with laughter instead of obligation. Maybe even Sunday lunches where no one asked me to take the group photo, but someone actually wanted me in it. So I paid. And paid. And paid. Some nights I'd stare at the bank app on my phone, watching numbers shuffle like tiny soldiers, organizing my sacrifices into neat little columns. 7 years. That's how long it took to pay down the mortgage. That's how long I believed that once the debt was gone, the love would flow easier. That maybe fairness had just been waiting for the right financial threshold to be met. I used to dream about taking my parents out to the back porch, handing them a small frame with the words, "Paid in full," printed inside. They'd cry, I'd cry. Sierra would hug me and say she never knew how much I did. But none of that happened. Instead, the day the house was paid off came and went like any other. No one mentioned it. My parents never asked how the taxes got handled that year, or how the plumber was paid for the kitchen leak. They just lived in the house I kept upright, surrounded by the comfort I funded as if it had always been theirs alone. Maybe that's the hardest part, doing the right thing and realizing no one was watching. I told myself for years that it didn't matter. that being needed was enough, that I didn't have to be chosen as long as I was useful. But usefulness is a dangerous currency in families like mine. It buys you proximity, but never permanence. And when someone shinier comes along, your value depreciates quickly. Back then, I didn't know what I was setting myself up for. I thought I was buying security, connection, a shared future. But the truth was simpler and much harder to admit. I wasn't part of the house. I was just paying rent on a fantasy. The vineyard glowed in early autumn light, a perfect backdrop for the picture-perfect wedding Sierra always dreamed of. Rows of white chairs lined the stone pathway, flower petals scattered like someone had planned every step down to the breeze. And maybe they had. This wedding was curated, not celebrated, styled, not lived in. Matt and I arrived just before the ceremony. He adjusted his tie in the rearview mirror, glanced at me, and gave a small smile. "You ready?" I nodded, even though the knot in my stomach was already forming. As we stepped onto the gravel path, a woman with a clipboard greeted us with overdone cheer and asked for our names. She paused, frowned, then pointed us toward the seating chart. I scanned the glass panel, rows and rows of names printed in swirling script. There it was, Eleanor Harper. Not Elena. Eleanor. Close enough, I told myself. It was just a name. But names matter when you've spent your life being overlooked. And this one, my own, had always seemed to vanish in rooms where Sierra's sparkled. We followed the chart to table 10 near the back, close to the bar and far from the head table. There were no familiar faces, just a mix of people from Sierra's husband's tech firm, a couple of extended cousins I barely recognized, and someone I assumed was the photographer's assistant. No parents, no immediate family, not even a distant aunt. Matt leaned close. "Want me to switch cards?" he whispered. I shook my head, forced a smile. "No, it's her day. Let's just enjoy it." But enjoyment wasn't on the menu. Every toast echoed with names I didn't recognize. Every laugh felt like it belonged to another world, one I'd never been invited into. Dinner came and went in a blur of filet mignon and polite nods. I barely touched my plate. My eyes kept drifting to the head table, my parents beaming like royalty seated between Sierra and her new husband, Grant. My mother's laugh was loud, her eyes bright. I hadn't seen her that joyful in years. Certainly not at my wedding. Certainly not ever for me. Then the glasses clinked. My mother stood straightening her lavender gown and tapped her spoon against her glass. "If we could have your attention, please," she said. The room quieted instantly. My father rose beside her, hand resting lightly on her back. I held my breath. "We just want to thank everyone for being here," my mother said. "This day, it means the world to us." My father smiled, his voice firm and proud. "Watching Sierra grow into the woman she is today has been one of the greatest blessings of our lives, a pressure built behind my eyes. I willed it to stay there. She's brought so much light and joy to this family," Mom continued. "And we wanted to give her and Grant something meaningful to start their life together." She reached into her clutch and pulled out an envelope, thick and cream-colored. My stomach turned. "We're giving them the house on Willow Creek," she announced. Gasps, applause, laughter, even a few tears. I didn't move. The house. The house I'd paid off. The house I'd carried like a second skin for 7 years. The house that still listed my name on every utility bill and maintenance request. No warning, no discussion, just handed over like it belonged to them and them alone. Sierra stood shocked and tearful, throwing her arms around our parents. Grant grinned like he'd just won the lottery. Maybe he had. Matt's hand found my knee under the table, firm but gentle. I couldn't look at him. I stared straight ahead, my fingers gripping the edge of the napkin in my lap so tightly the threads began to fray. I forced a smile. A quiet, practiced thing. Don't cause a scene, I reminded myself. This isn't the time, it's her day. But inside, something cracked. After the speeches, there was dancing. Cake, flashing lights. I excused myself to get air walking past the rows of lanterns, the photo booth, the wine barrels turned into cocktail tables. I stopped behind a hedge near the overlook. The photographer was staging another round of portraits. Sierra and Grant stood on the porch of the house. They were laughing, glowing. The photographer gave a soft directive. "Hold up the key together." I froze. Grant pulled something shiny from his pocket. He and Sierra held it up together. A brass key. The key. They smiled at the camera like they were holding a family heirloom. Like they had earned it. Like I didn't exist. My heart beat so loudly I thought it might echo. I took a step back, then another, not because I was afraid, because I finally understood. I had been erased, not forgotten erased, and no one at that wedding even noticed. The drive home from the vineyard was silent. Matt didn't push. He didn't ask what I was thinking or how I felt. He just drove his hand resting loosely on the gear shift, his eyes occasionally flicking toward me in the dim cabin light. I sat stiffly in the passenger seat, arms crossed, staring out at the road lit by patches of moonlight and old street lamps. I wasn't sure what I felt, rage maybe, shame. Grief twisted into something tighter and sharper. Mostly I felt foolish. We pulled into the parking garage beneath our building just after midnight. I stepped out without a word, walked to our unit, and took my shoes off at the door like always. The fridge hummed. The hallway clock ticked softly. Everything looked the same, but nothing felt familiar anymore. In the bedroom, I hung my dress neatly in the closet and sat on the edge of the bed. Matt stood in the doorway for a moment, watching me. "You want to talk about it?" he asked gently. I shook my head. He didn't press. But as I sat there, the silence swelled between my ribs, dense and heavy. I whispered, "They gave it away." He nodded once. "I know." I was quiet a long time before I said it aloud. And I paid for it. There it was, truth in plain form. I waited for the self-righteousness to rise, the anger to burn hot enough to numb me. But all I felt was the slow, aching emptiness of understanding something I hadn't wanted to see. Maybe I should have seen it coming. Maybe it wasn't even about the house. Maybe it was never about the house. That night I didn't sleep. I lay in bed with my eyes open, staring at the faint swirl of shadows on the ceiling. My mind spiraled backward beyond the wedding, the key, the applause to a moment that had lingered for years in the back of my memory like a bruise that never fully healed. Law school graduation. I'd worked 3 jobs to put myself through. I ate ramen more often than I want to admit and studied in coffee shops because the apartment I rented was too loud. When I walked across that stage cap too tight and gown a bit too long, I scanned the crowd for my parents. I spotted them near the back next to a pillar. They clapped politely. Afterward, we met outside. My mother hugged me brief and distracted, then handed me a card. Inside was a check for $50 and a note that said, "Proud of you. Love, Mom and Dad." I smiled, said thank you, folded it gently, and tucked it into my purse. I told myself it was symbolic. That money was tight. That the gesture mattered more than the amount. 2 years later, Sierra graduated with a communications degree from a state college. My parents threw her a lake house party, invited 30 guests, catered food, champagne balloons. They handed her a set of keys to a brand new Subaru with a bow on the hood. I told myself again that maybe things had changed financially, that maybe they had just gotten a bonus or a refund. I made excuses because I needed to, because I wasn't ready to name what I already knew. It wasn't about timing or money. It was about being chosen. Matt and I sat on the couch the next morning, sipping coffee in silence. He broke it first. "Colin," he said, then paused. "Elena," he corrected softly. "You've done more for them than anyone could ever expect." I didn't respond. "You paid their mortgage," he continued. "You showed up every holiday, every birthday, even when they forgot yours. You call, you check in, you send them gift cards, and they act like you're, I don't know, a neighbor who drops by to be polite." I opened my mouth to defend them out of habit more than belief. "They mean well," I started. "Do they?" Matt asked. I closed my mouth. That afternoon, something in me clicked. Not loudly, but with the cold precision of gears shifting in a machine long ignored. I sat at my laptop and opened the county's property records portal. It only took a few minutes to confirm what I already suspected. The house had never been in my name, not once, not as a cosigner, not on an amendment. The mortgage had been paid with my funds, but the deed had always listed two names, only Raymond and Carol Harper, my parents. And now, as of 3 days ago, it listed new owners, Sierra and Grant Nichols. Signed, notarized, filed. I stared at the screen until my eyes burned. Then I opened a drawer, pulled out a Post-it, and scribbled something down in block letters. I wasn't part of the gift because I was the gift. I stuck it to the fridge. That was the moment I stopped asking why they didn't see me, and started asking why I kept hoping they would. The phone call came 2 days after I saw the deed transfer. It was my mother's voice, bright polished like she was reading from a script. "Hi, sweetheart," she chirped. "It's been too long. Sierra and Grant just got back from their honeymoon and we're having a little dinner this Saturday. Just the 6 of us. You and Matt should come." There was no mention of the house, no apology, no explanation. Just pot roast and pleasantries as if none of it had happened. I should have said no. But I didn't. Some fractured, still hopeful piece of me wanted to believe there would be acknowledgement, some gesture of clarity or even regret. Maybe they'd say they didn't realize. Maybe they'd admit it wasn't fair. Saturday arrived with an early October chill. The leaves hadn't fully turned yet, but the wind had that hint of change, crisp-edged expectant. Matt and I drove in silence. As we turned into the familiar street, I saw the new curtains in the front window. Sierra's taste lace and white, too delicate to touch. The doormat was different too. The Nichols family. S. 2023. I stopped on the porch and stared at the brass door knocker. I had polished it every Thanksgiving as a kid. "It's like I never lived here at all," I whispered. Inside, the smell hit me first. Not cinnamon apple, the candle my mom always burned, but vanilla and sandalwood. Sierra's scent. Her preference. Dinner was already plated when we arrived. My mother greeted us like we were old friends she'd run into at the grocery store. "You look tired, honey." "Working too much?" she asked, placing a hand on my arm that felt more like punctuation than affection. Sierra sat across from me, glowing in a white cashmere sweater that probably cost more than my monthly car payment. Grant gave me a polite nod like we were meeting for the first time. My father poured wine and said little. We made it halfway through the salad before my mother set her fork down gently. So she said, folding her napkin with precision, "Now that Sierra and Grant have their own place, your father and I have been thinking." "Here it comes. We'd like to move into your cabin," my father said as casually as if he were asking to borrow sugar. I blinked. "My cabin? The one up in Fairview," my mother added brightly. "It's perfect for us. Single story, quiet, near the church." I stared at them. "You want to move into the home I bought?" "Well, it's not like you live there full time," Sierra chimed in, swirling her wine. "You and Matt are always here in the city. It just sits empty." "You mean the property I purchased with my own money," I said slowly, "that I maintain, insure, and pay taxes on?" My mother waved a hand. "Don't be so dramatic, Elena. We're not taking it. Just living there." "You didn't even ask," I said, voice low and tight. "You decided, like always." "Here we go," my father muttered. "You're being harsh," my mother scolded. "We thought you'd be happy to help." Sierra leaned forward, fork in hand. "You've always been jealous, Elena. Ever since we were kids. You couldn't stand that I got more attention, more help. But that's not my fault." The room went still. "That's why they love me more," she added, eyes locked on mine. "Because I never made them feel guilty for it. It was like being slapped, not because I didn't know it somewhere deep down I always had, but because no one had ever said it out loud. And now there it was. The truth spoken across our mother's best china and a rosemary pot roast. Matt reached for my hand under the table, but I was already rising. "If they love you so much," I said, pushing my chair back slowly, "maybe they can live with you." No one stopped me. Not my mother, not my father, not Sierra. As we stepped outside, the cold hit my face like clarity. I didn't cry. I didn't apologize. For the first time, I felt the exact opposite of guilt. I felt free. The notification came on a Tuesday morning. I was standing in the kitchen, half-dressed for work, sipping lukewarm coffee and skimming emails when my phone buzzed. Motion detected at 1448 Stillwater Lane. My breath caught. Stillwater Lane. The cabin. A second buzz. Then a call from a number I didn't recognize. I answered, heart already in my throat. "Hi, this is Dana with Ridgeview Security. Are you the homeowner of the Fairview property?" "Yes," I said. "We received a motion alert about 30 minutes ago. 2 individuals used a physical key to gain entry. They identified themselves as Raymond and Carol Harper." I closed my eyes. My mother and father. That key, I said, was never meant for that purpose. "Would you like us to notify local law enforcement?" I didn't hesitate. "Yes, I want them removed. I want them." 10 minutes later, Matt was at the door reading my expression before I said a word. "They went in?" he asked. I nodded. He grabbed his keys without asking. The drive to Fairview was silent. Not the kind of silence that begged for conversation, but the kind that comes when you already know what must be done. As we turned off the main road and climbed the gravel path, I saw the sheriff's cruiser already parked by the cabin. My chest tightened. And there they were. My parents sat on the front steps like squatters, a half-drunk coffee mug in my mother's hand, a box labeled linens beside her. My dad stood when he saw me smiling faintly, as if this were a reunion, not a violation. "There you are," he said, like he'd been expecting me. I walked past him without a word. The deputy stepped forward. "They say they're your parents," he said, neutral but firm. "They are," I said. "And they don't have permission to be here." My mother stood, her mug clinking against the wood. "Elena, what are you doing?" "What you left me no choice but to do," I said evenly. "You were told no." "We raised you," she snapped. "We supported you. How can you be so ungrateful?" "Ungrateful," I repeated, nearly laughing. "You gave away the home I paid for, and now you've broken into the one I own." "It's not breaking in if we had a key," my father muttered. "No," I said, "but it's trespassing if I rescind permission, and I did. You knew that." The deputy turned to me. "Would you like to press charges?" I looked at my parents. At the bags, the boxes, the way they'd packed like they were settling in for the season. "No," I said, "no charges, but I want them off the property. Today." "Understood." He nodded. "We'll escort them to town. They'll need a place to stay tonight." Matt was already gathering their things. He didn't speak, just moved quietly and efficiently like he had expected this day to come all along. My mother looked like she might cry, but no tears came. "This isn't how family acts," she whispered. "No," I said softly. "It's how boundaries work." We drove their belongings to a storage facility in town and paid for a 30-day unit. More than they deserved, maybe. But I wasn't interested in cruelty. I was interested in closure. Back home that night, I stood by the window in our apartment and stared at the quiet skyline of Asheville. Lights blinking in buildings, lives moving on in the dark. Matt came up behind me and wrapped his arms around my waist. We didn't say anything for a while. Then I whispered, "They used to call me the responsible one." "You are," he said. "No," I said. "I was compliant. There's a difference." He kissed my shoulder. "Not anymore." I didn't sleep much that night. But it wasn't insomnia born of stress. It was something else. Something like clarity. Like waking up from a fog I hadn't realized I'd been in for decades. For the first time, I didn't care if they apologized. I didn't need acknowledgement. I didn't want validation. I just wanted distance, and now I had it. They taught me to be useful, to be quiet, to keep giving, keep bending, keep smiling. But today, I learned something new. I could be still. I could say no. And I could mean it. 3 days after the cabin incident, I learned that truth can be manipulated faster than it can be spoken. It started with a ping on my phone during a client call, then 2, then 7. I muted the device and kept nodding through a discussion about investment strategy, but the growing buzz made my skin prickle. When I finally checked, the notifications came in waves, texts from distant cousins, old classmates, even a former neighbor I hadn't spoken to in years. My stomach dropped. Then I saw it. My mother had posted on Facebook. Her new profile picture showed her and Sierra embracing at the wedding, perfectly lit, perfectly curated. The caption was far more dramatic. "We never imagined our golden years would look like this. Our own daughter has turned us out like strangers. After all we've done, all the sacrifices we made. We don't know where we went wrong, Please pray for us." Underneath were 2 photos. One showed them sitting on the front steps of my cabin, bags beside them, heads bowed like refugees. The other was a close-up of the sheriff's cruiser parked out front. The narrative was clear: I had abandoned them, cast them out into the cold, betrayed the ones who gave me life. The comments rolled in within minutes. "Unbelievable. Kids today have no respect. Disgusting. You raise them and this is how they repay you. My heart breaks for you, Carol. Sending love. And worse, she married that Matt guy and suddenly forgot where she came from. Sounds like she's been poisoned by money and pride." I sat in stunned silence, staring at the screen. Matt walked in from the balcony, setting down a glass of water. One look at my face, and he knew. "What did she do?" he asked. I handed him the phone without a word. He read the post, scrolled through the photos, and sighed heavily. "Of course," he muttered. "This is what happens when you stop playing the role they assigned you." More messages came in. Some were cautiously curious. What's going on? Others were accusatory, assuming the worst. Not one person, not a single voice from the chorus, asked me directly for my side. That was what stung the most. I had been the quiet one, the dependable one, the one who sent thank you cards and remembered birthdays. But now I was the villain in a story they didn't even ask me to narrate. Matt leaned against the counter, arms folded. "You know what you have to do." "I don't want to stoop to their level," I said. "I don't want to make this uglier than it already is." "It's not stooping," he said quietly. "It's reclaiming your place in the truth." That night, I pulled out the folder. I'd started building it slowly over years without even knowing why. Maybe I sensed one day I'd need to prove I existed beyond the obligations they assigned me. There were PDF statements from my bank, 7 years of transfers labeled things like mortgage, R&C insurance, reimbursed roof repair. I had texts from my mother asking me to pay the plumber, cover the property taxes, handle a surprise repair. I had screenshots of emails confirming my payments to contractors, even a digital receipt from when I paid to have the entire HVAC system replaced. Then there was the voice recording filed quietly by Matt months ago after a strange phone call with my mother that left him rattled. Her voice scratchy and calm. "Elena's always been the workhorse. That's her role. Sierra deserves ease. She's had a harder time emotionally. Elena can handle disappointment. She's used to it." I listened to it again, headphones in, sitting alone at the dining table. My mother hadn't said those things in anger. She'd said them as fact. Like reciting a family recipe or a grocery list, justifying the imbalance with a calm so practiced it chilled me. I opened my laptop and created a post. No emotion, no drama, just order. I uploaded the voice clip. Then a series of images, receipts, payment confirmations, text messages lined up like the pieces of a puzzle that had never been acknowledged. I wrote, "For 7 years I paid the mortgage, the maintenance, the taxes, and the emergencies. I didn't do it for recognition. I did it because I thought love was earned through service. But when I set a boundary, I became the villain." If you've ever been rewritten in someone else's story, you're not alone. Here is mine. I hit post and closed the laptop. I didn't stay to watch the fallout. I didn't check the likes, the shares, the comments. But they came. By morning, the tone had shifted. Texts that once assumed my guilt now offered apologies. A cousin messaged I didn't know. "I'm sorry for judging." Even some of the nastier comments on my mother's post quietly disappeared. No public statements. Just silent edits, as if people had seen enough to realize the narrative wasn't so simple. My mother never responded. She never deleted the post. But she stopped tagging me in family photos. And that was enough. I had spoken. I hadn't shouted. I hadn't raged. I hadn't begged to be believed. I had simply told the truth. And for once, the truth was loud enough to stand on its own. By the end of the week, the noise around my name had shifted, not vanished, not forgotten, but mutated into something quieter and stranger. What began as a digital lynching full of righteous fury and generational scolding became an awkward, uneasy hush. The Facebook post from my mother was still up. The photo of her and my father on the porch steps of my cabin, surrounded by neatly packed bags, and looking like castaways, still sat prominently at the top of her profile. The caption still read, "After everything we've done, our daughter has turned us away. We never thought our golden years would be so painful. Please pray for us." The reactions had slowed, but the fallout hadn't. At first, people commented with fire. "You raised her, and this is how she thanks you. How heartless can one person be?" Karma comes fast. Now, some of those comments were mysteriously gone. Others had turned measured. Maybe there's more to the story. I don't know the full details, but this feels one-sided. I've seen this happen in families before. It's complicated. And privately, messages began to arrive. From a high school friend I hadn't spoken to in a decade, "Elena, I read your post. I'm sorry I believed what I saw at first. Your strength is something I wish I'd had years ago." From a second cousin, "You don't owe anyone an explanation, but thank you for giving one. Some of us needed to see that." I didn't reply. Not out of pride, but out of preservation. I wasn't interested in applause for my pain. I had lived in silence for too long to make noise now for sport. This wasn't a show. It was a reckoning. But I wasn't done. Not yet. I made an appointment with Gregory Bell, a mild-mannered estate lawyer with the eyes of someone who had seen families come undone over far less than love and land. His office was warm with the scent of old paper and faint lavender. There were framed degrees on the wall and a large oak bookshelf behind his desk. Everything about the space said, "You are being taken seriously." I handed him a flash drive with everything I had compiled, scanned mortgage statements, property tax bills, insurance records, repair invoices, screenshots of text messages asking for money, and most chilling of all, the voice recording. He listened to my mother's voice on the memo, calmly explaining to Matt that Sierra deserved comfort and that I was built for disappointment. Gregory didn't flinch. He simply nodded. "You've done your homework." He turned his screen toward me. "Did you know your mother ran a title search inquiry on your cabin?" I blinked. "No." "It was 2 weeks ago," he said, "right before that dinner invitation." I felt my stomach twist. So it had been premeditated, not a spontaneous idea over dessert. Not a misunderstanding or miscommunication. A plan. We drafted the cease and desist letter together. It was firm-specific and utterly devoid of emotion. It read, "To Ms. Carol Harper and Ms. Sierra Nichols. Effective immediately, you are to cease all verbal, written, or physical attempts to access or occupy the premises located at Stillwater Lane. You are to return all copies of keys and access tools to said property within 5 business days. Any further attempt to claim ownership, residence, or rights to this property will be met with legal injunction and damages sought under state and federal law." There was no room for ambiguity, no space left for guilt trips or family scripts. The letter went out the next morning. That afternoon, my phone rang. The name on the screen made my throat tighten. Sierra. I hesitated before answering. "You really want to drag our family into court?" she said, skipping any pretense of civility. "I want you to stop acting like you're entitled to things I built," I replied calmly. There was a pause. "You could have just talked to us." "I did. You didn't listen. This isn't how family acts." "No," I said. "It's how adults protect themselves when family keeps crossing boundaries." Another silence. Then her voice softened slightly. "You're choosing property over people." I took a breath. I had expected this line, maybe even rehearsed my response a few times in my head. Still, it surprised me how easy it came out now. "No," I said. "I'm choosing peace over manipulation. There's a difference." "You think you're the only one who's ever sacrificed anything," she snapped. "I think I'm the only one who is expected to keep sacrificing forever." There was nothing left to say after that. She hung up. I stared at the phone for a moment, then turned it face down on the table. I didn't call Matt over. I didn't recount the conversation. I didn't need to. Because something had finally shifted inside me. This wasn't about a house. It wasn't about money. It wasn't even about justice. It was about truth. For years I had been edited out of my own story, rewritten into a role that made everyone else more comfortable. The quiet one, the dependable one, the invisible one. But not anymore. They called it betrayal. But what I did wasn't betrayal. It was reclamation. The finality came not with shouting, but with an email. Property access terminated. Items retrieved. Parties have relocated to rental residence Hendersonville. Gregory Bell's wording was as neutral as ever. No exclamation points, no judgments, just the facts. My parents had signed the official withdrawal from the property access dispute. They were now listed as tenants of a modest one-bedroom unit in a retirement complex a few counties over. And just like that, the storm had passed. But unlike every other family conflict before, where I'd been the one to smooth things over, to call first, to cave, and ask if we could talk this time, I didn't reach out. There was nothing left to say. They had crossed a line, and for the first time in my life, I hadn't scrambled to redraw it in chalk. I'd drawn it in ink. Sierra's social media disappeared almost overnight. Her Instagram went dark. Her Facebook profile photo reverted to a generic silhouette. No more perfectly posed porch photos or pastel captions about gratitude. No more lake house peace or blessed and thankful stories. Just digital dust where her curated persona used to be. But I didn't feel triumphant. This wasn't justice. This was release. I didn't wake up gloating. I didn't replay the argument in my head for satisfaction. I didn't think I won. What I felt was quieter and somehow far more powerful. I felt like I could breathe. Nada. No one was waiting for me to fix their disappointment. No one was hovering silently expecting me to explain myself in ways that served their comfort. No one was rewriting the story while I silently endured it. They had backed away, and I had stayed standing. That alone felt revolutionary. On Saturday, I drove up to Stillwater Lane alone. The trees had shifted since the last time I was there. The color was deeper now, reds and rusts and fire orange. Leaves skittered across the gravel as my tires rolled over the path. The air smelled like cedar, and something sharp, like the beginning of winter. The cabin stood in quiet defiance, untouched. A safe house I had once built out of exhaustion, now restored to its original purpose, refuge. A woman answered the door when I knocked. She was in her early 50s, silver in her hair, soft lines around her eyes, and a kind of alert gentleness in the way she opened the door. "Hi, you must be Elena," she said. "I'm June." June was the traveling writer I had approved as a seasonal tenant, a novelist working on a book about grief and reinvention. She'd found the cabin on a quiet rental listing, said something about the photos calling to her. She welcomed me in like an old friend. Inside, the air was warm. A candle burned on the windowsill, pine and clove. The curtains I'd sewn one winter were still there, and the porch swing out front had a folded quilt on it. The furniture was arranged the way I liked it, functional, not fussy. My books still lined the shelves. "I hope you don't mind," she said, gesturing to a corner table. I moved the chair near the window. "The light's better in the morning, helps me write." "Of course," I said. "I'm glad it's useful." We sat together on the love seat I'd once assembled while listening to rain hit the roof. She poured tea into mismatched mugs. One of them was mine. The one with the chipped rim I could never bring myself to throw away. "I love it here," June said, hands cradling her cup. "There's a stillness to this place. It's not just quiet, it's sacred. Like someone lived here, not just occupied it, but really lived in it." I looked around. The beams overhead. The handmade hooks by the door. The faint scent of lemon oil I'd always used to clean the wood floors. Everything was still there, and yet everything had changed. "They did," I said. She smiled at me like she understood more than I was saying. We walked the cabin together. I pointed out the drawer that stuck if you pulled it too hard, the way the front window swelled when it rained, the fact that the heater kicked once before fully turning on. She took mental notes, nodding gently. She was the kind of person who didn't just listen, she received. When I was about to leave, she reached into a drawer and pulled out a folded napkin. "These were in the back of the kitchen cabinet," she said. "Linen." Handmade right, I took it from her fingers, brushing the soft fabric. I recognized the stitching immediately. "They were a gift," I said. "I left them behind once. Now they stay." She held my gaze, no questions asked. "Feels like they belong here." "So do I whispered. Driving back to Asheville, I let the quiet sink in, not as an absence, but as presence. The road unwound beneath me. No urgent calls, no suppressed arguments. No need to guard myself from the next breach. Just stillness. Just me. When I walked in, Matt was making dinner. Sautéed vegetables and brown rice, nothing fancy but enough to make the apartment feel like home. We ate side by side on the couch, watching a documentary about America's national parks. At one point he paused the TV, turned to me and asked, "Are you okay?" I didn't need to think. I nodded. "Yeah, I really am." That night I lay in bed with the window cracked slightly open. The air smelled like fall. For the first time in as long as I could remember, my thoughts didn't race ahead or circle back. I wasn't defending myself in imagined arguments. I wasn't waiting to be punished for choosing peace, because peace hadn't been given to me. I had fought for it. I had chosen it. And now finally I lived inside it. 3 months had passed. In that time the noise had faded. No more voicemails that began with sighs and ended with guilt. No more comments from distant relatives pretending to know my heart. No passive-aggressive posts or vague prayer requests online. Just quiet, long, unbroken stretches of it. And for once I didn't feel anxious in the silence. I felt free. My parents had settled into their retirement apartment in Hendersonville. From what little I heard through mutual acquaintances, it was simple, comfortable, unremarkable. No one called to update me. No one reached out to ask how I was. No invitations. No explanations. But I didn't grieve the absence, because I had finally stopped mistaking neglect for normal. At the office, I moved through my days with more certainty than before. I no longer hovered at the edges of meetings waiting to be invited to speak. I no longer ended every statement with, "if that makes sense," or, "but I could be wrong." I spoke clearly, took ownership, and didn't apologize for taking up space. One afternoon, as I was walking back from the break room with a mug of green tea, I passed the glass-walled conference room and saw something that made me stop. Anna, our newest hire. A junior financial analyst, barely a few weeks into her first job, stood at the head of the table while one of the senior partners picked apart her report. He wasn't yelling, but he didn't need to. His voice was clipped, dismissive. Anna's shoulders tightened. Her hands clasped in front of her were trembling slightly. I recognized the expression on her face. I had worn it many times. The meeting ended, and she stepped out. Her eyes flicked up and caught mine, then dropped instantly. "Anna," I called gently. She paused. "I saw your report," I said. "You did good work." Her eyebrows lifted slightly. "Really? Yes. And next time, bring it into the room yourself. Don't let someone else speak over your work. You deserve to own it." She smiled, small, hesitant, but real. "Thank you. That means a lot." We stood there in the hallway for a moment, two versions of the same woman years apart. I thought about how long it had taken me to stop apologizing for my own value. Some lessons aren't meant to be kept. They're meant to be passed on. That evening I came home to the smell of roasted garlic and the sound of music playing softly from the living room. Matt was in the kitchen humming off-key while stirring a pot of risotto. I dropped my bag near the coat rack and walked into our bedroom. My body ached, not from stress, but from release, the kind that settles in only after months of holding yourself too tightly. I opened the bottom drawer of my desk, reaching past folders and paperwork, until I found it a small wooden box with a brass latch that stuck sometimes. I'd bought it years ago at a flea market for no particular reason. Inside was a single item, a key, simple, brass, familiar. The cabin key, the one my parents had used to enter a home that didn't belong to them. The same key they once held up in a wedding photo like it was a trophy. Like it symbolized something they had earned. Like I was never part of the story. I hadn't thrown it out. Not because I needed it, but because I wasn't ready to forget what it had meant. Now, though, I wasn't holding it with anger. I was holding it with clarity. This wasn't a symbol of what they'd taken. It was a reminder of what I'd reclaimed. I reached for a strip of masking tape, smoothed it across the lid of the box, and wrote in black marker, "Things I survived." Not things I lost. Not what they did to me. Just things I survived. Because that was what it came down to. Not the house, not the arguments, not even the betrayal. It was about endurance. It was about the invisible strength it takes to say no for the first time after years of being taught that silence is virtue and sacrifice is love. I placed the box back in the drawer gently, like closing a chapter I no longer needed to reread. Later that night, Matt and I ate dinner together on the couch, sharing quiet laughter over a bad documentary. The food was slightly overcooked, the wine too sweet. It was perfect. At one point, he turned to me, eyebrows raised. "What's that look?" "What look?" "That look that says you just did something important and aren't telling me." I smiled. "I just filed something away." He didn't press. He didn't need to, because the truth was simple. They had called me ungrateful. They had whispered that I'd turned cold, selfish, difficult. But the truth I stopped giving when I stopped being seen as someone worth keeping. That wasn't betrayal. That was a boundary. And this time I wasn't crossing it for anyone. Maybe you've been the one who gave everything without asking for much. Maybe you've stayed quiet to keep the peace until there was nothing left to protect but your own peace. If any part of this story felt like yours, tell me in the comments. I read every single one. And if you want more stories that speak to the strength it takes to set boundaries, don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned. This isn't the end. It's just the truth finally being told.